Chris, so lovely to meet you. Thanks so much for coming tonight. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about proof of capital and what you guys invest in.
Yeah. Hey everybody. My name is Chris McCann. I'm one of the managing partners of Proof of Capital. We're a new venture capital fund, almost about a year old. Mostly focused on the infrastructure layers across many different industries. I particularly probably spend the most of my time on the FinTech and FinTech infrastructure side of things. But in terms of the fund, we do both seed and Series A investments. And then before this, I used to work at a much bigger fund called Greylock Partners, which you and your viewers might be familiar with.
Of course, yeah. What do you personally like to invest in? You said more on the infrastructure. You want to clarify that?
Yeah. As I mentioned, more on the FinTech and FinTech infrastructure side. So particularly interested in things that we're starting to see a lot of these, call it like developer platforms, APIs, infrastructure as a service, actually start to bleed into the FinTech side as well. So think like banking as a service, lending as a service, services around AML, KYC, financial crimes, sort of all the tangential things around this. Because as more and more FinTech applications actually appear and start, they're all going to need all these underlying services as well. So I've been spending a lot of time in that market and recently wrote a post too. If you search Chris McCann FinTech infrastructure, you should be able to find it.
Okay, thank you. It's been such an exciting start to 2020 in the FinTech domain, and I wondered what your view is on what the big investments are going to be this year.
Yeah, I guess maybe to tie into some of the infrastructure related stuff is I actually think one of the sort of next biggest, most important customer segments for banks is surprisingly enough actually going to be developers. So banks are typically used to either dealing with retail customers or SMB businesses. But now what you're seeing is more and more you're seeing developers not just want access to like the data of the bank, they actually want access to the functionality of the bank. So like I want to be able to embed account creation, like a checking account opening in my app. I want to be able to issue cards to my customers. All these are developer functions. So you're seeing this like new customer or partner class emerge, developers, which is why like we pay, or at least I pay so much attention to all the API infrastructure services, because that is a very new net customer class.
Interesting. And I know that you had an investment in Lightning there when they got the gig with Visa.
Yep.
And so I was wondering what your perspective is on what's happening in the blockchain crypto world.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Elizabeth and the Lightning Labs team, which I have a lot of respect, would necessarily 100% agree with me on this, but I actually see Lightning as more of the same thing like I was mentioning. I actually see it as FinTech infrastructure. It just so happens to be that the underlying asset that they're using is Bitcoin, but all the applications that they're enabling on top, micropayments, you're now starting to see a lot of Lightning apps that merge both fiat accounts in with Lightning payments as well. Out of many of the things in the space, Lightning actually has a really, really good developer community, which that was like the main thing that actually attracted us to the company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. And so just generally speaking, do you see an upturn coming? Everyone's got all their perspectives. My sense is I'm not really sure what's happening because I'm not a developer or an investor, but I've been supportive of Bitcoin since 2008. In Ireland, we had the huge crash and everything went down and everyone went bankrupt. Yep. And the whole of Ireland had to take pay cuts, everyone, while they propped up the banks. So I figured this was obviously going to be a better alternative, and I still feel like it's going to end up being the new normal, but obviously it jumped the chasm and now it's sort of settled a bit because people got burnt. What's your perspective on what's happening with that?
Yeah, and I guess if you're referring to like Bitcoin or crypto sort of assets specifically, at least in my head, I'm a little skeptical of a lot of the, call it like generalized apps and like smart contract platforms. Like I wrote about a lot of the stuff, even when like the sector was super hot, I was a little bit skeptical about it. But at least to me, Bitcoin is the most clear. It's an uncorrelated asset. And again, maybe that might be a niche thing in terms of number of people, but when you think about that, almost just think like digital gold. Yeah. Like that's actually a pretty big, just in terms of market value. And if there's one thing that like Bitcoin is actually like very fundamentally proven, like it very much is an uncorrelated asset. Coronavirus is up, Bitcoin goes up, coronavirus is down, Bitcoin does whatever. It doesn't really follow anything. It doesn't really follow the markets or debt or anything. It just sort of does whatever it does. Yeah. So at least to me, it makes total sense as a portion of somebody's portfolio. In terms of a lot of the other things, like to be seen on a lot of that stuff, but Bitcoin as an asset class like makes a lot of sense, at least to me.
And the blockchain, do you see that as a strong point as far as more stuff going to be happening on the blockchain? Everyone seems to be keen on it.
Yeah. I guess when you talk about the blockchain, maybe like two broad generalizations. So sort of one, blockchain for enterprise, more sort of permission type stuff. For most of these, like I actually just treat them more as enterprise financial services. Like the blockchain is just like the technology that they're using, yes. But in terms of the go-to-market and customers and everything else, like it should just be almost treated just as a normal company. Yeah. And then you have, I guess, more of the speculative stuff of people using smart contracts and decentralized finance and a lot of people building more things on top of that to be seen more on the user side of how much usage these things have. A lot of it is very intellectually super interesting and there's a lot of stuff going on in the space. But again, at least to date, it's been sort of a little niche still. Yes. But very much worth paying attention to from a sort of innovation standpoint.
Right. We will pay attention then. Thank you. Thanks. And thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm sure it's going to be a great panel.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the panel and thanks for inviting me.